Hey all, welcome to my channel. Today we'll take a look at an SEO reporting template on Google Looker Studio with data from Google Search Console. My name is Shirazi and I'm an SEO practitioner with almost 4 years of work experience as of today. Before we take a look, let me tell you what this template aims to achieve. So it aims to be a one-stop shop for an SEO practitioner to monitor site performance, investigate drops, increases, find insights, and quickly visualize web data available through Google Search Console. It intends to be a handy tool specifically for an SEO practitioner and not to be shared as is across the team or to the clients. And the reason I created this was to help save the unnecessary amounts of time I was spending on creating monthly reports or working on ad-hoc data requests from the team. And I personally found this template to be much more efficient than just using Google Search Console and also much more insightful. And you will see how and why as we go through the template. But firstly, we learn how Search Console calculates data differently for site and URL impression. Then we learn how to use the template by looking at each slide and the value it provides. After that, we'll take a closer look at how to use filters to customize the data and make it relevant for you. And lastly, we'll wrap it up with how you can copy this report for your account and create custom page groups. Now, looking at site versus URL impression, we should know how Google Search Console collects and displays data differently based on whether it collects data for the site as a whole or data collected for every URL individually. Now let's take a look at an example. So search for Apple returns the following 5 pages on search results from the same site, that is apple.com. So if a user sees this set of results and clicks on each link, here's how the data calculated changes. So for example, a user will click on the home page and then come back and click on the site links. So impressions and clicks will be 1 for the entire site if the data is aggregated by site. But if the data is aggregated by URL, it will be 1 for each URL and 5 in total. And because of this difference, the way click-through rate and average rank are calculated changes. So for data aggregated by site, the CTR is 100% since all the clicks are going to the same site, and the average rank is 1 because the site occupies the number 1 position. But when data is aggregated by URL, the click-through rate falls to 20% per URL because we have 5 pages ranking and each page received 1 click, and the average rank will be 3 for each URL in our example. Looking at a real example from Google sample data for Google Merchandise Store, for the query YouTube Store, the data is different for site and URL impression. And if we just filter for YouTube Store, we can see that site impressions are 2100, whereas URL impressions are 10,800. Now this is because URL impressions are the summation of impressions each URL gets for ranking for this query. This was important to learn because this template uses both site and URL impression, and we need to know how the data has been calculated to make an accurate judgment. Besides, if you haven't already realized by now, query data by site will paint a more accurate picture of how our site is performing for any particular query. Now let's move on to really see what this template is all about. It starts with a slide called At a Glance, but that is best understood after we take a look at all the other slides. So let's start with site overview. And as the name suggests, this is the big picture of the entire site, and the data here is by site impression. By the way, the entire report can be configured to your desired date range, and thereby it can be anything from a weekly to quarterly report. So if you go to report settings, you can customize the date range here, and since we have selected last month, our report will be a monthly report. So looking at the slide, firstly, all the slides contain filters, and this one has one for country, device, and query, but no landing page because site impression data does not give us data for every URL individually. The scorecards provides an immediate overview of site performance along with comparisons versus previous period and previous year. So since our date range selected is the last month, so that is Jan 2024, so the previous period will be the preceding month, that's December 2023, and previous year will be the same month but in the previous year, so that will be Jan 2023. Now, an important thing to note here is that clicks and impressions are percent change, whereas CTR and average position are actual change. The daily clicks and impression chart quickly visualizes the short-term trends for the set date range, and this has been set up to roll monthly. You can change that here by just clicking on the chart and changing the date range. It's important to remember that this entire report is customizable, and you should definitely do that to make it relevant to your account. Similarly, the year-over-year chart provides long-term trends, and this chart is also set up to roll monthly, so it will keep updating as the months go on. You can also export the charts to an Excel spreadsheet to get the raw data. So just click on the three dots on the top right, or right click anywhere on the chart, and you can export it as an Excel spreadsheet. Looking at top queries and pages, again, as the name suggests, this slide gives us the highest traffic driving queries and pages. It's sorted by highest clicks. Unfortunately, sorting by percent change is not possible, but there is a workaround to that. And like the last slide, clicks and impressions are percent change, and CTR and average position are absolute change. The comparison date range is by default selected to previous period, but you can change that by clicking on the table and changing that year, or you can duplicate this slide and setting the other one for previous year. An important thing to note in this slide is for all metrics except average position, a green arrow indicates a positive change, so number going higher, and a red arrow indicates a negative change, so the number going lower. Now this relationship is true except for average position where it's inverse. Unfortunately, this is a limitation in the table styling where we can't set the positive and negative change for each metric individually. The data in the query table is aggregated by site impression, whereas the data in the top pages table is aggregated by URL impression, and that's because only that data source looks at every URL. Google sample data doesn't actually provide us with average position for URL impression, but that will not be the case when you make a copy for yourself. So what's the additional value from this slide? So firstly, the impression number in the query table can be an accurate reflection of search volume. If your site is consistently ranking within the top for that query, so in case you don't know, an impression is registered for Google's web results whether or not your site is scrolled into a user's view. So if your site is ranking within the top, then the number of impressions your site registers for a query is likely the search volume for that query. So the benefit here is that you do not have to wait for Google Keyword Planner to update its database for the previous month. We also get a quick overview of how the site is performing. So if there is a considerable change in average position for any query or page, that can also explain the better or worse performance. Looker Studio also gives us access to thousands of additional queries and pages while exporting. So in this example, we have access to more than 19,000 queries, and this is one of my favorite benefits of using Looker Studio, because Google Search Console only has a 1,000 row limit when we are exporting to Excel. So even here, each table can be quickly exported to an Excel spreadsheet, and a great time saver here is that percent changes or absolute changes are already calculated for us. So once we export to Excel and clean up the formatting, we now have more options to filter and find insights, and now we have our workaround to filter by percent change. So if I filter site impressions percent change by descending, I now have access to all the queries my site earlier wasn't ranking or appearing for, and this can help us find breakout or trending queries and get ahead of the trends. Getting back to our template, we can click on any query within the table to quickly filter and see which pages are ranking for it. So if I click on YouTube Store, it will show me only the pages that are ranking for that query. And this is really helpful to quickly detect cannibalization or evaluate why one page is performing better than the other. And so in this example, we can see for YouTube Store, the category page is performing better than the product pages. Unfortunately, since the data aggregations for the two tables are different, the queries cannot be filtered by the page. So if I click on any particular page here, it won't show me only the queries that are ranking for it. But to overcome this, you can change the data source of the query table to be URL impression, but you will lose the accuracy of the query data. A better alternative is to create page groups for specific subfolders, and we can then quickly navigate to those slides. So we do have these set up in the template, which we'll take a look at in a bit. And before we do that, let's take a look at the non-branded slide. And again, like the name suggests, this slide aims to quickly show us how our site is performing for generic or non-branded queries. So of course, tables and charts in the slides have been filtered to exclude data from any query that contains our brand related terms. The way I've set this up is by adding a page filter. The page filter excludes all queries containing Google or YouTube in our example. So if I show you that here, you can just go to page and current page settings and have a filter. and exclude our branded terms. We'll dive deeper into how you can set up and use filters in a bit. And so similar to the previous slides, you can click on any query to filter to only show pages that are ranking for that query, and also the charts here will show the long-term trends for that query. Now you can customize this by increasing the length of the page and also adding the short-term trend chart. Moving on to page groups, the slides here are identical to the ones we saw earlier, except now the data is specific for the page group that we have filtered for. Now the entire template follows the same pattern for different page groups with an overview slide and then a top queries and pages slide. In this case, the data is for the apparel page group, and we have filtered the slides here to only show data for URLs with apparel in them. And now the scorecards, the tables, the graphs, they're all specific to the page group that we have set up for. Like I mentioned earlier, Google sample data aggregated by URL does not contain average position as a metric. This will not be the case when you make a copy of the report and replace data sources from your site. And now, since you have filtered for specific terms in the URL, the data displayed is only available via URL impression. And so when we go to the top queries and pages slide, we can see that it only shows us URLs with containing apparel in them and the queries bringing traffic to it. Now, since both tables are from the same data source, we can click on any URL to filter to show only the queries ranking for it. Similarly, we can filter by queries and see how pages on our site are performing against each other. But now, since the data source is URL impression, the data in the query table is a summation of all URLs. So in this example for Google hoodie, we can see that the impressions are 2400, but that really is a summation of all the URLs that are ranking for that query. It does not really mean that a site as a whole got 2400 impressions for that query. If we compare with top queries and pages slide, which has the query table by site impression, we can see Google hoodie has 779 impressions because it's counting one impression for the entire site no matter how many URLs rank for it. So to me, query data by site impression is a much more accurate representation of how the site is performing for those queries, because percent changes, for example, when we are looking at data, query data by URL impression, can be dependent on the number of URLs that were ranking for that query. So in this example, again, we can see that Google hoodie has a 45% drop in impressions, but that really is because there were more URLs ranking for it in December versus Jan. And if we look at top queries and pages again, the actual drop in impressions is only 27%. You can actually test this out by going to Google Search Console and note down the number of clicks, impressions, and CTR for the queries. Then add a page filter and only enter your domain name. You will then see how the numbers change based on site versus URL impression now that you have added a page filter. The entire template is now the same with the overview and queries and pages slide, but sorted out for different page groups. So lastly, we have the at a glance slide left. So this one brings together the overall performance of the entire site alongside the page groups that we have set up all on one page. So since it's only scorecards, it allows us to immediately compare how the different site sections are performing, and we save time finding which areas of the site are contributing to better or worse performance. And once we identify those sections, we can quickly navigate to those page groups here and then dive deeper into what's happening. And once you copy the template for your site, you can customize the slide by replacing the filters and adding additional page groups. Now let's dive deeper into how to create and use filters, starting with the site overview slide. So first of all, there are two types of filters, and the first one is a page filter. So it basically applies to all the elements on the page. We see these at the top of every slide. So as an example, if I filter it to only show data for United States, it will now apply to all the elements present on the page. So the scorecard, the charts, the tables, whatever is present on the page. Alternatively, we can also set a permanent page filter by toggling the settings. So if you just go to edit page and current page settings, you can add a filter and then create a new one for whatever it is that you'd like to add. So I'll create one for United States only. And I'll just select country as a dimension here and select equal to and add United States. And once I do that, the filter is now permanently applied to the page. And just to show you here, if I select country, United States is the only option. Now you can also easily remove it back by going to current page settings and just removing the filter, and you will have a clean slate again. Now the second type of filter is an element filter, and that will only apply to that particular element. So sometimes it may make sense to apply certain filters only to a particular scorecard, chart, or table. For example, if I know 99% of my traffic is branded, it might make sense to filter overall click-through rate by branded keywords only. So if I click edit and choose CTR, I can add a filter that will only apply to it. So let's create one for branded keywords only. So I'll name this as branded keywords only, and then select query as the dimension, and then select rejects contains and add the branded keyword. So in a similar format as to how you use Google Search Console. So just for an example, I'll add Google and YouTube here, and we can see how the click-through rate is now increased. So it might make sense for our brand or whatever account that we handle. Now, if we want to filter by landing page, we can use the page group slide. So for example, if I want to filter for apparel pages, for just the men's apparel pages, I can go to the apparel overview slide and just add men in the landing page filter, and it will automatically apply it to all elements. However, I do not recommend using page groups for query filters because it uses URL impression and the data as a result may not be accurate. So if we look at the top queries again, and I want to see how the site is performing for any query that contains hoodie, if I add, I'll just take this off here. So if I add hoodie as a query in the page group slide, the data will be as per URL impression, but we know that query data may not be accurate when we are looking at URL impression. So if I go to the site overview and add query filter to contain hoodie, we can now see the impressions are actually 6,200 and the site CTR is 5.2% as compared to 8,300 and the CTR being lower. So this is definitely one of my favorite features of the template, where I can just filter by query and immediately get visualizations, short term and long term, and I can quickly share these insights with the teams. So for example, if you have recently completed an SEO task and I want to show how it has positively affected traffic, I can quickly filter the slide with the query, and then I can get the short term and long term trends as to how our site traffic has improved after making that change. Now finally, let's wrap this video up by looking at how to copy this report for your account. So first of all, log into the Chrome profile which has the Search Console access for your desired site, and then just copy and paste and open the report link. So I'm going to open the report on my personal account. So I'll just copy the link and open it here. Now once you do that, you can click on the three dots on the top right and select make a copy. And now we'll have to replace the data sources. So we will first replace the URL data. So just click on the corresponding arrow and choose create a data source, and then select Search Console. Once you do that, just select your website, and then now be sure to select URL impression because that's what we are replacing, and click on connect. Before you click add to report, be sure to rename the connection here. So for this one, just rename it as URL plus your website name, and then now add to report. Now follow the same steps for the site data. So click on the corresponding arrow again, create data source, select Search Console, and now select the same website, but now select site impression. And similarly name the connection name. And click add to report. Then lastly, just click on copy report. And that's it. Great job. All the data and charts in the report will now be from your site. Now my personal website does not really have any data. So to understand how you can make this template customized to yourself, we have to learn how to create page groups. So for that, let's go back to the original template where we have Google sample data. So firstly, we can go to the existing page groups and replace the filter there. So just click on edit, click on manage pages, and go to the apparel overview page. Now from here, click on page, current page settings, and just replace the filter here by clicking the pencil icon, and you can now just type in the page group that you would like to add here. Once you do that, just rename the page group here on the page manager and also on the title of these slides. And to create new page groups, what we should do is to duplicate the current ones. So as an example, I'm going to duplicate the accessories page group. So firstly, I'll start with the overview slide, and then I'll also duplicate the top queries and pages slide and just set them in order. And just to give it a cleaner look, I'll add a divider here. And before I begin, I'll rename this page group. So I want to see only data for pages that contain lifestyle. Once I do that, I'll also rename the slide titles. Now, once we have done that, we can go to page current page settings and then remove the existing filter and add a new one. So now I'll add a filter and create a new one, and I'll name this as lifestyle pages only, and then include select landing page, and now contains / lifestyle, and save. And that's it. Now the slide is displaying data for only pages containing lifestyle. We should do the same thing for the queries and pages slide, but this time we'll not be creating a new filter since we have just created it. So just delete the existing filter and then click add a filter, and then just select it from the filter picker. So once you do that, it will take a second and automatically update the data. And there you go, all the data is now updated to only of those pages that contain lifestyle. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope I was clear in explaining the value of this template, and I definitely hope that you use it and it saves you a ton of time. If you do have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments and I'll try to come back with an answer.